Welcome to A4NB4Y. Welcome to the A for No, B for Yes podcast, where we're going to be diving into Zelda Ocarina of Time as our first game and talking about our individual experiences that we have with the game, and maybe we'll dive into other Zelda games after this. But for now, I'm Cameron, and these are...
I'm Ryan Fonzie.
I'm Anthony DeMeo. In these experiences in this game, we're going to cover everything from lore about the game, to monsters, to creatures, to secrets. Anything you can name of an Ocarina of Time, we're going to try to cover it, so you guys get the best experience with the Ocarina of Time possible.
And just as a side, I mean, we expect that you've either already played this game, or you're looking to play this game, and you can play along with us as we go through the story. We appreciate any kind of feedback, any kind of personal stories you have of your own time with the games. And yeah, we'll be discussing it amongst ourselves, but we'll definitely, hopefully down the line, be able to include some of your stories as well.
Yes, we definitely will appreciate that. So the first story that we're going to cover today is going to be the beginnings of Link. And we're not talking about Zelda. The boy in the forest, Kokiri Forest, and his story, where he began.
Real quick, before we get into that, I think just kind of as a further introduction of ourselves, I was actually hoping that we could kind of go over like what our own first experiences with this game were. Because I know at this point, I mean, I've played through the game probably twice. I'm in my third and fourth playthrough at the same time right now. Having a ball with it.
Going hard.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny because like the first time I remember this game was probably, I mean, it came out in 1998. I was 6 years old back then. I don't think that was actually my first time seeing it. I don't think I saw it till I was maybe 8 or 10, but it was funny because actually the first time I saw it played was a whole family was playing it together as their like family bonding time. They lived in the apartment above my parents' house, and yeah, I remember seeing them go through Goron City just trying to like land bombs inside of the giant vase, and
that is interesting.
It wasn't until like a little while later that I actually got my hands on it myself to play through this opening story. So yeah, first time I owned it was on the GameCube. I never even had it on N64. How about you guys? Any particular memories that stand out about this game from the yesteryear?
Well, I guess I could talk about the first time that I picked a Zelda game up was The Legend of Zelda, and that is because my mom was obsessed with it. And so I knew nothing about Legend of Zelda. And, I obviously had the N64 for Super Mario 64. That was like a classic. I think it was the year 2000. And my mom actually bought me the Ocarina of Time. And I knew nothing about this game, the series. Like, it had been going for like 8 years at that point. And I played the game for the first time, not knowing what I was getting into. I mean, I'm a little 8-year-old sitting here like, oh, The Legend of Zelda, that seems cool, I'm not like too into it. And just from getting into Hyrule Field after the Deku Tree was just like so amazing as a kid, because like, the kind of game that came out like that back then, like you didn't have that stuff. So seeing like this world, and it's not as immersive as games today, but it just captures a sort of like fantasy. It's almost like reading a book, I guess you can say.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely was like a huge milestone game. I think it's kind of cool to hear about your mom being obsessed with The Legend of Zelda, though.
She's the reason I actually got into it.
I know. It's so, I mean, I don't know how common that is. My parents were not into games at all. They thought I, was going to have issues with them because of how much I liked them, and maybe they were right. But it's kind of refreshing to kind of hear like some heritage style stuff going on with you and your mom like that. How about you, Cam?
Yeah.
My first time with Ocarina of Time was also on the GameCube with the Master Quest edition. But that wasn't the first time I played a Zelda game. My first Zelda game, I think, because this is going back a long time, was Oracle of Ages. And I actually had a pretty bad experience in that game because I found a soft lock and was not able to continue past the final, like halfway through the final dungeon of the game. But that's neither here nor there. After that, I played A Link to the Past, which is an amazing game that I'm actually kind of going through again right now and do occasionally. But Ocarina of Time was just massive because of the 3D jump. And it was like before it felt like a Zelda game was a lot of fun, but now it felt like it was more personal. Like I actually felt like a connection with Link because of, you know, the whole 3D environment that you were thrust into, and it was new back then in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Didn't you soft lock into like the water temple in this one as well? I feel like I remember that happening to somebody.
I think I just got really confused and couldn't find out where to go, and it just took me a really long time. I don't think you can soft lock in OOT, in Ocarina of Time, without glitches.
There used to... I feel like there used to be a problem.
I remember...
That. Somebody had it. Somebody had that issue.
Yeah, because I remember that.
What, in Ocarina of Time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've always been scared of, like, having it happen to me, just being careless in the water temple whenever I play the game. I know that they fixed it. Like, if it was an issue, I think they completely, like, kind of made it so you couldn't do that anymore in future versions. Like, the 3DS or the Master Quest one, I don't think had the problem, but I think in the original N64, you could lock yourself at the water temple and not be able to get any further.
Ugh.
Which is grossly far into the game. Maybe not as bad as Oracle of... I don't know which one you said, but...
Ages.
Ages.
Let's see. Is there anything else I want to add in there? I don't think so. I had a blast playing it. I played through it probably like every 5 to 7 years I would play through it. And then I also got into watching speedruns of it later on, more recently. And yeah, that's how I got into it.
Man, speedruns, I can't even fathom speedruns, man. I've tried watching one, and just once they start glitching the game, like I feel like I struggle so hard. I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I don't know.
No, I would never want to do that either.
Sometimes it's interesting to watch. Be like, wow, you beat the game how fast? Oh, you jumped through that person? Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, you mean you took advantage of the code and wrong warped yourself to the very end of the game off the first door? Oh, okay, cool. 8 minutes? Yeah, I could do that.
That may not be a possibility in the Ocarina of Time, but that is definitely a possibility in Breath of the Wild, but we'll get to that a later day. And I think Cameron actually has a sort of secret for us later, too.
I have a couple things I found that I don't know if you guys went all the way into looking for, since I was trying to focus on the secretive things.
I don't remember finding too many secrets in this part of the game.
But I also want to see if you guys did it, because I'm playing the 3DS version, which is the most recently remade version. I don't know if there's any content aside from being able to refight the bosses that was added. So I'd be interested to see if you guys took a line that I did and if you found the same things I did. But that's after the Deku Tree, so we're going to start from the beginning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
All right.
So I guess we'll jump right into the game then. We start off with a narration actually from the Deku Tree, kind of explaining a little bit just about how everybody in the forest has a fairy. There's a boy without a fairy. This is you're Link. Say hi, you know.
Yeah.
He's currently in the middle of a nap. And what you find out a little bit later is that he's in the middle of a nap because he hasn't been getting good sleep lately. He's actually making up for lost sleep. He's been having nightmares. And the nightmares are actually caused by a sensitivity to this evil that is entering this land. You live in the Kokiri Forest, known for being a barrier between Hyrule and things outside of Hyrule. So this Deku Tree knows that you are the child of destiny and has this mission for you. And so he sends Navi to your house to wake you up and to call you over to help. You know, he makes references to you not having much time. You know, once Navi comes and wakes you up, you come outside, you run into Saria, who is your next door neighbor and best friend. She has a fairy. She's super excited to find out that today's the day that you've gotten your own fairy. since everyone in the town seems to know you as the boy without one. And then you kind of go on your way towards the Great Deku Tree. Well, you didn't have to go directly there. I don't know. Did you guys go straight towards the Deku Tree, or did you kind of wander the village, kind of knowing a little more about what you were going to need ahead of time?
I'm definitely a wanderer type in games. I explore every nook and cranny. It must be from my Dark Souls background, but I visited all the townsfolk. I sort of was gathering rupees because I did remember that when I, my first playthrough of it before that, you needed to buy a shield before you could even get past Mito. So I was sort of doing that, just exploring the town. And this playthrough, I'm sort of getting a view of the every landscape, seeing how I never really cared to look at the landscape really until this playthrough. I'm sort of taking everything in, the trees on the top and where we're located and all the buildings and all that other stuff. So I sort of took my time with it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tried to appreciate more of the story than I did as a kid. I will say that. Back then I was I'm this cool green guy, I can do rolls and jump, and he yells at stuff for no reason. It's it took me a while to figure out what I was actually supposed to do. I remember back then Kokiri Village used to take me forever. And now if I was trying to get through it quick, I could probably be out of there in 5 minutes. So, it's but this time around I was definitely taking in the sights on purpose. Yeah, I definitely went straight to Mito though, just to get the story, because he won't let you through anyway. Yeah, how about you, Cam? What'd you end up doing?
Well, I played the game enough that I knew you need a sword and a shield. So I immediately went to get the sword because, you don't really need anything to get the sword aside from knowing where to go. Right. So I grabbed that. And then I remembered a couple quote-unquote secret places that you can get rupees. Like if you run around the building with the kid trying to pick up the bush outside, run across the 2 bridges, you can get a blue rupee just for free. It's not actually there on my version anyways. It wasn't actually there to see, but once you run all the way over there, it just appears above your head. And the same with right outside the shop, there's the 3 platforms you can jump, and if you don't stop running the whole time and you do the consecutive jumps and land them, you also get a blue rupee. There's a couple things that you can just kind of run around and try things out, and you'll possibly get some money for it. And then I grabbed the shield and I was on my way.
Yeah, you do kind of notice that as you go around the town, everything is kind of geared to be a hidden tutorial, aside from the guys in the training center and the know-it-all brothers, they're very outright a tutorial. They'll straight up tell you what buttons to press, and it's breaks the immersion a little bit. But everything else is kind of like a tutorial in disguise. Here's how you platform in this game. Here's how you climb things. Here's how whatever. I remember even if you lock onto that dummy in the training center and do a backflip, I think you get a rupee for that. It just kind of randomly pops up above your head.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, just random stuff. You'd be running and all of a sudden you just see a rupee come out of nowhere. But if you did go straight to Mito without having a sword and shield, he calls you Mr. No Fairy. He kind of just distinguishes himself as kind of this. Yeah, he's kind of a jerk. It's funny. If you go to his house on the sign, it reads, the house of the great. I don't know if it says great on the sign, but it says, this is Mito's house, and underneath it says boss of Kokiri Forest, which I thought was pretty arrogant. I'm this guy, he's just
narcissist,
man.
The high school bully,
right? It's funny because you go inside of his house and he's got 3 chests with rupees and 1 with a heart, and you just steal all of it and leave. And if you go into Saria's house, I know it's kind of a jump, but I spent a little bit of time just looking at the houses, figuring out what was going on in each of them. And the 2 that I care most about, because the rest are kind of useless, Mito's house and Saria's house, right? They're the main characters of this village. Saria's house is full of hearts. It's got hearts coming out the ceiling. You go outside, there's hearts on the roof. You go inside, there's hearts all around the room. Clearly this is a character who is, I don't know if it's just supposed to be hospitality. Like, hey, you came to my house.
She has a big heart.
Here's a heart. You know, she's a big-hearted individual. I feel like there are strong undertones that she, you know, has a thing for Link. You know, like, I remember being a kid. I didn't know what love was. You know, like, I had ideas, but, like, you know, it wasn't. Yeah. So it very much kind of tells that story, though, of, like, here are these two best friends or whatever. And, you know, I think later it makes more sense to get into that a little deeper because she does have a major story point here in the beginning of the game. But when you do finally get that sword and shield, you're able to get past Mito, and he's not happy about that either. He tells you like I'll still never accept you as one of us, and then lets you. So you
could say he almost has very good insight because, you know, he still says it's like he knows you're not one of them, basically.
Yeah, and the game doesn't really tell you that yet. You know, like.
Yeah.
There are people who are struggling to lift rocks, and you can lift them. Like, there's no issue. There's a kid who's pulling on weeds. I don't know what his deal. I mean, I know what his deal is. Mito told him he had to do it. But yeah, it's funny. Like, there's this whole dichotomy of, like, here's your best friend, here's your worst enemy. They're both the two most other important people in the town. And Mito is jealous of your relationship with Saria. So, like, Mito actually promises Saria, hey, I'll get rid of those weeds for you. And then turns to this other Kokiri kid and is like, hey, get rid of them weeds. It's like, this guy. By the time I was through there, man, I was struggling with Mito.
He knows how to delegate. All of it.
Yeah. So you finally do get past Mito and his barricade that he's got going on. And we get over to the Deku Tree.
And you have your first encounter, too, before you get to the Deku Tree.
You do, yes.
For anyone who's never, you know, like, they just throw you into this combat. I mean, it's not hard enemies, but, you know, the Deku Babas, a classic enemy in Ocarina of Time. And I found something, actually, that I was telling Cameron. If you have a Deku stick, when you try to attack the straight-up Deku Babas, it'll go right through them.
Like, it just doesn't make contact.
And it's something that I never really looked into. It works for the ones that charge at you. But the ones that are straight up, your Deku stick goes straight through them. And I thought it was a little odd when it happened. Yeah. It makes no sense. Because he swings diagonally. But, yeah, your first enemy. And once that happens, you know, you kill them and you go to the Deku Tree. And that's where the story continues.
Speaking of those Deku Babas, though, like, do you know what the difference between the ones that lunge at you and the ones that are, like, stuck up in the air? Because I know, like, some of them have different attack patterns, and they're very strict. Like, the ones that stand straight up do not attack forward.
The ones that stand straight up, they do have this, like, tornado-like pattern that they do. If you get a little too close to them, they sort of spin in, like, a little small direction.
Yeah, they make themselves look like a tornado, kind of, except not fast enough.
Yeah. And then the ones that lunge at you, I found the trick to killing them. Because when I first started, I just ran right up to them, and he attacked me, and I lost, like, 2 hearts. It's embarrassing, I know. But I found the strategy for them is to actually run up as they're about to lunge and just, like, Z target them, you know, let the lock on, and walk left and just circle them. They kind of sit there for like a second, giving you a chance to do the vertical swing down on them. It's a very easy way to kill them.
Nice.
You can also block their attack, and they have like about 1 to 1.5 seconds opening, or you could also just back up, and then their head will just stay down right in front of you for a second. You can get a free hit, but that one's a little risky. If you don't back up fast enough, you get smacked.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I usually just hold my shield up when I back up, and that way, if I'm not fast enough, like, they'll still hit the shield.
Idea. Yeah. Well, here's another thing about Deku Babas. The ones that stick straight up and do the tornado attack, they always drop sticks. But the other ones, depending on how you kill them, you can get either sticks or nuts. If you hit them once and then they stick straight up in the air and you hit them again, they die like the other ones and you get the stick. But what is it? If you kill them before they stick all the way straight up in the air, then they kind of shrivel into themselves and turn into Deku nuts instead of being like decapitated and turned into a stick.
Wow. Can you get seeds from them too? Do you know? I don't remember if they drop seeds or not.
I don't think you can get seeds.
Sticks, nuts, and seeds, man. There's too many Deku products.
I think seeds only come from...
There's too many Deku parts.
The Goma children and...
you can get the flowers across the... Or not the flowers, I'm sorry. The leaves that are scattered throughout the Deku Tree.
Yeah, the grass.
Those also give you...
Yeah,
those give you the seeds.
Oh, I forgot about those. Yeah, no, I got you there. I think I remember reading something about some of the Deku Babas being shriveled up. Like if you actually like activate Navi on them, like one of them just basically says, "This is a Deku Baba, watch out!" Like hit it when it stands up, get a stick, you know, something like that. And the other one I think says this one, like this Deku Baba looks shriveled. Like so, I wonder if one is like older than the other, and that's why they like act differently. It's just like some goofy detail that it's really seems unnecessary, but I'm not sure why they included it. But
I didn't actually use Navi at all, like usual, so I didn't get these messages.
Yeah, like trying to look into the story a little more. Like I'm trying to find clues in anything I can. I mean, the enemies don't tend to give clues really. There is one enemy though that I found interesting. I'll get to that in a minute though. I feel like that's a little later into the tree, because we haven't gotten into the tree yet. We're still talking about Deku Babas outside the tree.
We haven't even gotten to the Great Deku Tree yet.
So, I guess we'll continue. Sorry, we get to the Deku Tree. This large mustachioed oak-looking tree. And he has, he summoned you here, so he's got this message for you, that he's been cursed. He needs your help. You have to go inside, basically, and take care of this curse. It says, like, I don't remember what the exact line is, something about ridding the evil inside of him. I think he even mentions the evil climate and, like, saying, like, you probably haven't gotten great sleep lately. And pretty much asks you if you're up for the task. He's like, so he asks you if you have the courage. You can say yes or no. I think if you say no, he pretty much says, like, come on now. I don't have much time. Help me out here.
Yeah, right. But, you're gonna leave me like this?
Yeah, you say yes. He he opens his mouth. He says, then go forward. Courageous Link. Like he basically asks you, like, rid this curse using your courage and wisdom, and then go forth, courageous Link. And courage ends up being a huge motif of this thing, of this game. Mm-hmm. Link, I guess, spoiler if you haven't played the games, has always been kind of the character of courage. He's always been the one who represents that part of a 3-part system. And I think that the best time to discuss that will be after we talk about this temple, when the Deku Tree explains it all. So we enter the Deku Tree, and immediately you get a pan of the room, and there's moss and spider webs everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I guess first impressions, and it's not really first impression. For your first impression of this would have been years ago, but what are your first impressions this time?
The first thing that I want to say that I never put the 2 and 2 together is how well the developers made it look like you were actually inside of a tree. The cylinder room, it's like it doesn't really register when you're a kid. You just, it's a dungeon, you're exploring it. And then when you come in for a second time or third time, it's a tree. You have up, you have down. I mean, like, it's crazy that, like, the detail that they put into, like, the first dungeon. And yeah, there's side rooms and stuff, which, obviously could be as branches. There's an underground part of the dungeon, but all in all, like, the dungeon's pretty cylindrical. And It's just cool that, like, you go inside and the developers thought of that. They didn't make a actual dungeon.
To add on to that, was like, when I was a kid, I did kind of realize when I walked in, like, this is a big room, this looks like the inside of a tree, but I never made the connection that, like, when you go down, like, later on, once you get the thingy, you go down into, like, the roots, and then there's water down there, and I didn't even really like make the connection that we're, like, going down underground, and this is where a tree would have its stored reservoir of water.
Yeah, Yeah, I definitely like didn't realize just how deep into the ground you get, because you drop at least twice, two good drops into this tree. And what you learn is that fall damage isn't going to be a huge factor in this game.
Yeah.
And that, Link is not afraid of heights.
No.
Like one of the first demonstrations of courage that he has is being willing to fall amazing heights just to break a spider web. So, I mean, yeah, you go deep, and like it's funny because when you get down to the water, there's like grates letting the water through, which is very confusing. But
Well, the whole Deku Tree itself is confusing. It's like, who built these doors, you know?
yeah,
Who built the doors? Like, where did all this come from? Like,
They had to make it a functioning temple in some way.
one of the things that I come across a lot when I'm trying to analyze the story is like, okay, what about this is just video game logic, and what about this is actually story? Because like, if you even think about the village, like they have 6 houses and like 13 Kokiri living in the village. So there's not enough housing for all of them. Yeah.
Bunk up.
Amongst those 6 houses, they have a training grounds where they learn combat, but these Kokiri are not suited for combat. Like, there's stuff that is clearly set up just so that you learn the game. Like, that's not a story point that they have a training ground. They're not an army, Like,
the Great Deku Tree specifically requested that training ground for Link.
Right. That's what it would suggest, is like, the Deku Tree was like, yo, we got to train this kid. So we're going to put some dummies up. And hide the sword behind a rock. All right, cool. Anyway.
So pretty quick into the Deku Tree, after you go up a little bit, not too many other paths you could take, you find yourself getting the first thing that is going to become a recurring theme in pretty much every single dungeon or temple from this point forward, which is a map. A map that allows you to see like all the floors you've been to. It differentiates between the ones you've been in and the ones you haven't. And once you get the second part of that duo, you'll even be able to see the rooms where you maybe missed a chest or two.
Yeah.
And I want to point this out because I feel dumb for this, and I haven't played a Zelda game in a long time, but I was watching Ryan play through a later dungeon that we'll get to later, and I didn't know that you could actually put the map on the bottom right-hand side of the screen this whole time. I've been playing this Zelda game. This is my 3rd time through it, and I never knew that.
Well, the weird thing is
I thought you had to pause to get to it.
Yeah, it's linked to a button for some reason. Like there's a toggle, and I don't know if that trigger on the original system, just they couldn't find a better use for it. But you can just turn it on and off at will, and there's no reason for that. But that's so like you could go through the whole game, never hit that button, never realize that you had a map at your disposal. Yeah,
and I for sure did.
Some strange mapping there for sure. Question, because I know that there's the map like you were saying. When you guys went up to that first floor, like where that first plateau, I should say. And there were the skull waltulas, right? There's some spiders on the wall there. Mm-hmm. Did you guys actually try to climb that wall, or did you continue on to get the item of this temple first?
So I didn't try to climb it, and this is because I have PTSD from trying to climb it in a previous run where I knew what happened. And so, yeah, I this time did not. Basically, if you try to climb these things are going to lunge at you, and if your timing is off, where they're like turning on the wall and they see you, it's over for Link, basically.
I think this is one of the most trolling parts of the game, because it's not in your best interest to try to climb this wall, but the second you get near it, Navi will interrupt you and be like, hey, there's vines on this wall, you might be able to climb it. I'm like, no thanks. I know what I need to do before that. I'm not trying to climb that wall right now.
If you stick all the way to the far right side of the vines, though, there's a spot where you can climb up maybe 5 feet, and then your guy will automatically fall because there's nowhere left to climb that's coated, even though it looks like there is. But if you move over just a little to the left of that, you can actually get up the wall relatively easily without the Skulltulas being able to hit you. They still can, but it severely lowers the chance that they see you. It's like the very, very outside of their vision range, and you can probably with like 60-70% accuracy get up there, even though, again, you don't really want to yet.
Right. If you continue, you find yourself, I think you have to fight one Deku scrub. Like, you go through a door. Navi teaches you how to open doors, because it always confused me, because I thought I had opened like 4 or 5 doors by this time, but I didn't. I went back and it's like, no, there's no doors in the village. There's no doors to get into the Deku Tree. There's no, like, this is literally the first door you come up to, and Navi tells you that you have to press A to open doors.
Yeah, might as well be a door.
So you go in. I think this is the first time you fight a Deku scrub. Yeah, Anthony, you're our creature expert. You want to talk about Deku scrubs?
So, Deku scrubs are not necessarily bad guys, but they're not necessarily good guys. Basically, when you walk into the room, you see this plant, and he's just like, oh, hey, there's a guy in a green hat. Let's hurt him. And they start shooting Deku nuts at you.
Okay.
And these guys, at first, you might be a little confused when you see a Deku scrub, like, oh, how do I kill it? Because the second you get close to it, it just hides in its hole. And I remember as a kid having a lot of trouble with this, because I was like, what do I have to do? And then it clicked on me, oh, shield, right. And Navi will actually give you a warning as well if you're having trouble that, hey, you can block his attacks. So once you reflect using the shield his Deku Nut back at him, he'll actually kind of get hit and run around like a crazy, crazy Deku shrub, and you can actually talk to him, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Are we okay? Are we cool? And like something like that. Each one says something different when you talk to them. It actually sets up later for another type of scrub called the business scrub, which you can also talk to. But these ones are a little bit more like archaic and a little more angry.
Yeah, I definitely feel like fighting them, they were weirdly diplomatic. You would hit them once, they would kind of abandon their hole, and then you get close and they'd be like, wait. Here's a tip. If you don't kill me right now, I'll teach you something. The first one, this one, teaches you that if you hold forward when you fall, you can roll and avoid damage.
But he also warns you that if you fall too far, it might not work.
It might not work. He kind of laughs a little bit and then runs off. So we get past that. I have a theory about these Deku scrubs, by the way. I want to float by you guys, but we'll get to that when we get to the end, because he's not the last one we fight by any means. We still got to go through 2 or 3 or 5 more of these guys. So, so we get past him, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the room where we get our fairy slingshot. Yeah. Anybody have trouble remembering what you do with it off the bat?
No.
No. Yeah. There's a ladder. You shoot the ladder down. You get out. It's great. I actually last time I played through, there's like a floating platform in the middle of the room too, just to mess with you. Like, if you try to go for that first, you'll almost never make it to the chest. But if you just kind of go off the side and climb the ladder instead, you can actually use that platform on the way back and like catch the top of the ladder and not have to fall back down and climb a whole ladder again. But it doesn't save you that much time.
I also believe this is the room that has a very tiny secret in it, and there's a vine wall right next to the chest. You climb the vine wall, it's very skinny, and when you get to the top, there's a tiny little treasure chest there. When you open it, you get a heart. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, just a heart, but when you only have 3 of them, it's kind of a big deal. Especially if you're not good at killing the enemies right off in the bat, it's definitely a great thing just to get that heart, make sure you're full up on HP.
Yeah, because it's not a heart piece, it's just a heart.
And that's the first time I've noticed it. Yeah, it's just a heart.
Nice. All right, so equipped with this fairy slingshot, we can now clear out the Skullwaltula. By the way, that's the most ridiculous name. I mean, Skulltula on its own, it's like skull tarantula, right? But to just shove wall in the middle of that.
Skullwaltula.
So you can clear them out and, pretty much climb that vine unhindered, unlike what Navi was kind of suggesting you do earlier, which is pretty much just run into certain pain. Up at the top of the tree, I think you even get the compass before you make the plunge if you're exploring well enough.
So the compass was in a room. It's at the top, and you go through the door. The door locks behind you. Then you see a torch and a switch that's right in the front of this ledge. And then on the other side of the room, there's a ledge and a treasure chest. And if you go onto the switch, it actually raises 3 invisible platforms in the map. And you can then just jump across these platforms to the treasure chest, and that is where you get the compass.
Oh yeah, there's a gold Skulltula in this room too. In there.
Yeah, that's where you see your first gold Skulltula.
Nice.
That's a detail for a later thing.
Yeah,
but definitely collect those.
Definitely collect them. Yeah, I mean, all we know about them now is that they're gold and that they're Skulltulas, and that they give you tokens for some reason. Because I don't even think Navi can lock onto a gold Skulltula, so you can't even really get information about them yet. But there is a Skulltula in the room too that is kind of guarding that gold Skulltula. I don't know if now's the time to talk about Skulltulas or if you want to wait. I mean, until we come out the door. Either way, the first real Skulltula encounter is up next.
Something I want to bring up. So far in this game, everything that we encountered so far is actually in Ocarina of Time first. Which means, we've never seen this type of enemy in a Zelda game before. In all the Zelda games that came before, I think there was 4 or 5 of them. These have all been first enemies that we've never seen before. So, for people that were coming into the game, it's all new, basically. They've never seen these enemies before, so I thought it was a cool little detail.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Really, there was never any, Deku thing. I remember you get shot at by Octoroks, but there was never, a Deku version of that in the old games.
There was never a... Dekus were Ocarina of Time, unless Dekus might have been in a Link's Awakening, but Skulltulas were first. This was a first Ocarina of Time edition, basically.
I can see that, because they kind of...
The scary, red-eyed Skulltula.
Right?
Yeah, I thought Deku Scrubs were in the Lost Woods of A Link to the Past, but other than that, I don't remember anything else being in previous games.
So
I'm not even 100% on that.
This Skulltula, the thing about Skulltulas, I don't know about the wall Skulltula. I never looked at I don't even know if it's a wall Skulltula. Skullwaltula, right? Whatever.
Skullwaltula.
Yeah, I never really looked at those, but a Skulltula, I always saw them as just a skull. This is a skull with spider legs coming out of it for some reason. It has a stomach that you have to cut into. For me, that was always its back. But no, if you talk to Navi, she's like, cut its stomach. That's its weak point. I'm like, what? Yeah, these are these are spiders. They have red eyes at the bottom that look like teeth, and it has 2 big eye cavities that I guess are false. It's not actually a skull. It's a big spider that just has that pattern on it. And every time I see one, I struggle to see it that way. I try to take time and be like, okay, fight the illusion. This isn't a giant skull. It's a spider. Its eyes are at the bottom, not huge on top like it looks. Even though it looks like it gets angry and spins around. It still does that, but it's not the skull face that's angry. It's the little pincers at the bottom. I don't know, man. It's just a very confusing thing to look at. Yeah, I thought that what was kind of cool, this whole thing is about courage. That's what I kind of took back from the Deku Tree. He's asking if you have enough courage. Says go forward, courageous Link. Aside from the fact that you're about to take this massive plunge, which is acrophobia, right? Fear of heights. You also are fighting spiders left and right, which is arachnophobia. And those two are listed in almost every top 10 phobia list. That you could Google easily. It really seems like the developers were trying to give you something to be afraid of so that you could overcome it via courage, right? So what also kind of stands out to me is that these Skulltulas, they look like skulls. This is a cursed tree, right? It's on its deathbed. These are skull symbols literally signifying, hey, this cursed tree is dying. There are symbols of death everywhere in this tree.
It's very good connection.
It's a little bit morose, but it's true. Everywhere you go, it's these spiders are falling from the ceiling and stuff.
I never really realized that myself, but let me interject and say one thing that it is a Japanese game, and one of the biggest things in Japanese culture isn't necessarily the shock fear that is big here, boo, loud noise, you're scared, jump scare kind of thing. In Japan, they very much focus on the fear of the unknown. and how terrifying it is to not know exactly what you're up against. And the way that they talk about Ganondorf, or the big evil bad guy, before you go into the tree, is also like a fear of the unknown. Like, you're stepping into the beginning of a journey to fight someone that is so powerful that just they can curse and kill this tree that's been alive for who knows how many hundreds or thousands of years without even really trying. And to step into that and to take that on as some kid who just woke up from a nap he was having a nightmare from is like, it's a really big thing to embark on.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, of what you just said, where we don't know how old he is, and we never brought this up, but have you noticed the way Dust he talks? This and thine being the greatest thine venture. Like, he talks in olden English, and it's just to amplify like how old he really is. You know?
None of the other villagers talk like that.
Yeah, and I mean, later in the game, spoilers, there's a castle, and nobody even at the castle talks like that. So, like clearly this, there's definitely some like European imagery that goes on, but Old English isn't really a part of it, except for here with this tree.
Yeah, and I think they did it just to cement how old this tree really is.
Yeah. One last detail that I thought might be worth mentioning before you take the plunge, that web that you're breaking to do this. Like, to me, I didn't notice this previous playthroughs, but this time I was looking for things to kind of grab onto. You can take this for what it is, because it's not a very strong argument. But if this whole cavity that we're exploring is like the inside of this tree's face, because his face takes up the whole front of the tree, then that hole that we're jumping down into is very much like a throat, and to have it have a film basically of webbing across it, I think just really pushes forward that image that this tree is sick. It's congested. It's got a web phlegm flap. That's pretty gross to say, but that's this is basically what it looks like is going on here. Like, he's probably having trouble breathing if that was a thing. I mean, he's a tree, so that's not really how trees work, but like, and
there's not that much water in his pit either.
If this dungeon so far has been his skull, then that would be his throat, and it seems like he's sick with webs.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that there's something messed up and very foreign going on inside of him.
Yeah, and I think another cool thing, because the Deku Babas, the Deku Scrubs, these things don't seem to be part of the curse. I mean, because they're plants, like, they seem to be almost a part of, like, if I had to kind of build an analogy here, I would say that the Deku Babas are like the Deku Tree's immune system, almost, like trying to fight off this curse, but they doesn't know what to attack, so Link gets close and they just attack Link because he's there.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's right. I don't know what they were thinking when they put all these together, but it seems like half the time you're fighting tree-related things and half the time you're fighting spiders. So, yeah.
Yeah. You could almost think of them as parasites in a way. At least the spiders. Like, the spiders, and there's a spider coming up that we're going to get to, which is also a parasite. But it seems like the Deku shrubs were living there beforehand.
Yeah. So we take this plunge and we find that pool of water we were talking about earlier. Another gold Skulltula. Actually, there's two in this next room. And they're not hard to get either. Like, one of them you kind of have to jump into the token to get it. The other one's right on the wall. That would take you back out. They're very noisy. But they're the only real threat in this room so far. I mean, there's a puzzle there. I'm guessing you guys didn't have too much trouble with the torch lighting.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, it was just cool that they're kind of introducing the use of fire as a tool in the game. I couldn't really think of a great way to, other than fire is thought to purify things or whatever, like kind of burning away the webbing is kind of a cool image, but it wasn't necessarily it wasn't a super hard puzzle or, strong story point. So, I think it was just to just introducing puzzle solving in this game. So
it's also kind of funny how much fire is inside of a tree.
Yeah, you burn the webs, but it doesn't really light the tree, doesn't light the vines, doesn't, nothing else catches.
Who built the torches?
Yeah, you have to assume that these torches have been here for a long time. It's like, what was the purpose of putting torches inside of a tree?
What are these large blocks that have symbols written on them? It's just stuff everywhere, man.
Yeah, that's the dungeon element of the tree, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you get to the next room, and there is our second scrub.
Yes.
So basically, you fight this one, like, you do the same thing. You hit him with his own seed, since you know how to do that now. You chase him around the room a little bit, and he says, wait, don't hurt me, I'll give you a tip. In order, you'll never get past my brothers unless you punish them in the correct order. And he says it's 2, 3, 1, and 23 is number 1. And then as he runs off, he says, do you think I'm a traitor? Like, he asks you, do you think I'm a traitor? And he runs off. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was there, I'm like, I kind of do. I kind of do feel like at this point, I kind of do feel like you might be a traitor.
Yeah, because
the first one didn't sell them out, so why did you do it?
And he didn't even have to give you the right information. If we're talking like realism here, he could have lied to you and still gotten away. But he told you the right information as you find out, so I would 100% say that he is certainly a traitor.
It's almost like he's for the Great Deku Tree, like he knows what's going on, and he's like secretly telling you how to save the Deku Tree in a way. Like, because his brothers are guarding the Goma, which we'll get to later. It's almost like he's giving you this message in a way like, hey, please save the Deku Tree in a way.
So one last thing about this guy before we kind of move on, because I definitely feel like, there's a lot going on with his, like, again, being kind of diplomatic, being weirdly traitorous, doing things he really didn't have to. But like, then this is such a weird turn of topic. His little thing about 23 being number 1, I feel like is a reference to Michael Jordan. No,
23.
Seriously, because like Jordan was 23, like he was number 23 on the Chicago Bulls. I literally just looked it up because I was curious. He was on that team for 14 years, and the last year he was on it was 1998 when this game was released. So I don't know if there was a basketball fan in the production team who decided.
Shigeru Miyamoto is a fan, confirmed here. No, I'm just kidding.
But it just seems a little too coincidental that one of the best players of all time was, like, even as a kid, I wasn't a basketball fan, but I knew about Michael Jordan. Like,
yeah, as a not sports fan at all, I would have never known that at all until you just told me. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. So we leave this guy. I'm trying to get all these rooms in the right order, but I'm doing a really bad job of it. There's a room that has a spinning log of spikes.
Yeah, you have to press a switch. You got to go in the water, go underwater, hit the switch, which lowers the water so that you can ride the platform underneath. Or it either lowers the water or raises the spiky thing.
I think it lowers the water. I think that the next one is either the place where we first meet the larvae, like Goma's children.
It's sort of a circular room.
Yeah, it's either that or it's just a Deku Baba room with torches, and I don't remember which one is right. But both of these rooms are kind of within the next stretch before we get to our second and final drop.
Well, you do have to go back to the room we first dropped to, and that room, which is after the Baby Goma room, we have to go back there, drop a platform. There's like a big platform with an eye on it that you have to drop into the water.
Yeah.
You then jump across, grab the torch, and then jump back up to burn the web.
Right.
I think, or light the torch.
But if you're used
which
to
opens the
rolling
door
to get speed and you roll through the tiny bit of water to get to the block that you push down, it will put out your torch. Or it'll put out your stick. So you have to be a little careful. And if you mistime your jump and you jump into the water and start swimming, it will also put out the fire. So you gotta be a teensy bit careful.
Right. And there's Deku Babas in this room. If you don't clear them out first, there's a good chance they'll mess you up on your way. They don't like Link running by like that. They'll punish you.
And so once you grab the fire and climb back up the block, you find another one of those congestions and you have to get rid of it. But the caveat is that there's no large area there's no great height for you to drop down to break this. So how could you possibly do it? And you have to think that you've been burning the webs up until this point, and you have a stick that's on fire that you just brought back up and probably used to light the torch, so that if you didn't think of it right away, it would be easier to relight your stick. And you roll over the cobwebs, and as the stick rolls with you, the fire just briefly touches it, and the entire thing just lights up and is burned to a crisp.
Yeah, these webs definitely have some kind of accelerant on them.
Gasoline-soaked webs.
Man, maybe that was Queen Goma's final plan. Like, after she was done webbing, she was just gonna light the whole place up.
Well, so then we drop down, right? Mm-hmm. And we drop through the newly lit hole, and we get to a large open room. And once we drop, we see 3 mad Deku shrubs.
Yeah, we fall down and we have these 3 Deku scrubs that we have to remember the code for. So, we Jordan it up. We attack number 2, number 3, and number 1. And number 1 is the only one that ends up talking to you this time. Because instead of getting stunned, he actually leaves his hole and you can chase him down like all of his brothers before him. Mm-hmm. And he stops and he says, wait, don't hurt me. I'll give you a tip. In order to administer the coup de grace, like literally, like this is the kind of language this scrub is using right now. In order to administer the coup de grace to Queen Goma, strike with your sword while she's stunned. And then says sorry about that as he runs off, which I don't think he's apologizing to you. I think he's apologizing to Queen Goma, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
But here's where I get into my scrub talk, because these dudes, I'm like, honestly, when we started talking about doing a podcast about this topic, like, part of me thought that I'd have a whole segment about, Deku scrubs, friend or foe. What are they? Like, who are these dudes? Here's my thoughts on these guys. They share a name with the tree. Like, they're the Deku scrubs, right? Like, this is where they only exist within the Deku Tree. There aren't Deku scrubs anywhere else. There are very similar enemies, but that are also scrubs of different kinds. But Deku scrubs are in the Deku Tree. And my thought on it is that they are the Deku Tree's own doing. Like, they are his defense system. Like, they are there in allegiance with the Deku Tree. And I have a feeling that when Queen Goma arrived on the scene, she scared all of these dudes into submission. Like they all decided, okay, now we work for Queen Goma because she's here, and if we don't do what she says, then we're the ones who are getting eaten for it, So you make your way through here, and every time like you kind of challenge one of these dudes, like I think with this tree being from my opinion, I really feel like this is supposed to be themed around courage, like the whole spiders, heights, whatever. I mean, these guys are cowards. These dudes straight up, like,
true.
Goma shows up on the scene. They're like, oh my gosh, we're going to die if we don't. So they're like, we're going to do whatever Queen Goma wants us to do. We're going to fight off anyone else who comes in here. Like, she's the queen. We give up. So then Link shows up, and like the second he hits any of them and like really challenges their stance, they're like, oh, wait, don't kill me. Here's a tip. Here's how you get through here. Like, here's the deal. Like, even the one who teaches you how to fall without taking damage just was probably trying to give you a tip on how to, like, that you should be falling. Like, there's a place here where you should be falling in order to get through. You get to the end and they're like, here's how you kill Queen Goma, which is wild because, like, if the scrubs knew how to kill Queen Goma, like, why didn't they try it? Like, I don't know. Like, I think that they are telling you this information in the interest that if you kill Queen Goma, then they'll be safe. Like, they're like, listen, if we're gonna let you get through here, like, we need you to kill her, because if she's not dead and we gave up this information, we let you through, then we're dead. Like, that's just the situation. Like, either you kill her or she kills us. Like, so here's an advantage. Like, here's a tip. Yeah, it doesn't explicitly say that in the game. That's very much speculation, but that's kind of my take on these guys. I don't know if you guys got any similar vibes or if you just kind of,
I have a slightly different take, but I want to wait until we get to after the Deku Tree to go into it with my the spots where I found the other scrubs.
Cool.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So we walk through the door after we talk to these Deku scrubs, right? Mm-hmm. And we come to this large room, and nothing's inside of it. Absolutely nothing. Except you sort of hear noise.
And it's dark.
And Navi tells you to look up. And it kind of signals you, hey, up on the ceiling. So if you get your spacing in the
Can
little...
I say something before you get that far?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I want to think that it's also part of I mentioned before, the fear of the unknown, that you go into this room and the boss, which is definitely something big because it kind of fades. You walk through the door, it closes behind you, and then it fades out and it fades back in. It's very dramatic compared to all the other doors you've walked through, which are just, hey, look, he walks in, the door closes, ba-bam, it's done. You know that there's something special about this room. There's fog barely floating above. There's giant pillars which are covered in webs. And I feel like that, again, is bringing up the fear of the unknown. Like, what's happening? Where's whatever's going to come from? Is it going to just drop on me from this? Is it going to come up out of the ground? You don't know, and that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add on to that, I mean, I fear the unknown is great. I mean, it's fear the dark, too. I mean, it's a dark, dark room. There's even a fear of open spaces or just feeling like that your environment is unsafe, which is what this is, If I'm remembering correctly, when you enter the room, there's like a camera zoom that's very dramatic, like at Link, as if something is about to lunge at him, and then it gives you back your camera and there's nothing there.
Oh yeah.
And you kind of feel cheated of like a boss cutscene, but there is one to come. And I'm sure that's the next thing we'll talk about. So I know we kind of just like stomped all over your exposition, Anthony, but like
continue.
There was a lot here we didn't want to miss.
No, for sure. And it's something I actually want to bring up about this particular enemy in the game is this boss is not in Ocarina of Time first, and it's actually part of the Legend of Zelda. It was originally introduced. It looked like a Tektite, which is a later enemy we'll get to. And it was also in A Link's Awakening as well, if anyone has ever played that game. They look very different. This boss in particular, if you remember the Goma larva had one giant eyeball, which we never actually talked about them, and we do see them before this, and it sort of sets you up for this boss.
Yeah.
They have a giant like green antenna on top of them, being that they're Goma larvae. And then when we actually see, which I'll set up the boss here, when you pan your camera and look at the ceiling is when the first boss cutscene of the game comes into play. You see this giant, I don't even know if I want to say demonic, but sort of crab-like spider with two giant arms, crab appendages on the top of it, and it's just hanging there.
Watching you.
It's the first moment where you're like, oh, okay. So that was there this whole time, and that is scary. Like, you thought the Skulltulas were scary? There is this demonic crab-like spider with demonic crab-like appendages. I can't get across demonic enough. And if you actually get a look at its stomach, it's very hard to see it, but it's like the less armored part of the body when you see it on the ceiling, and it sort of looks like a giant intestine, which sounds really gross, but it's like the only unarmored part besides its eyeball, which we'll get into later. And that's basically the description of Goma, and it was not a first for Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. Did its eye roll back in its head like a full 360 in the other games?
No. So it was very, very simple. The other games, though, did introduce the combat method. So if you were familiar with the previous games, you would be familiar with the combat method and how to deal with Goma and Ocarina of Time as well, as they kept the same combat method, 2D to 3D.
I'd like to point in that before, when you ran into Goma's larva in the actual tree, that it definitely felt like that was out of place. Like running into the Babas, and I guess even the Skulltulas a little bit, they kind of felt like maybe the Skulltulas didn't belong there, but it's not like they really clashed. Like, they shared at least like a kind of similar color palette to the rest of the dungeon, whereas Goma and Goma's larva are like these purple, black, reddish, weird things with a giant, like, red or yellow eyeball. Like, they are very different and foreign to every other enemy or anything that you see, except maybe, you know, the grates and the torches and stuff like that in the whole temple.
And so that basically, I feel like, cements the fact that it's not supposed to be here, basically. Like, everything else is kind of felt like it's supposed to be here, and then this is like the first thing you're like, why is this here? And obviously it's part of the curse. And something else I wanted to point out I didn't talk to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it almost seems like Queen Goma. I mean, she's the arachnid queen, right? I think it even says like armored arachnid queen.
Parasitic.
Parasitic.
But yeah, she doesn't belong. I definitely agree with that. Like, it almost seems like the Skulltulas being of the same scheme. It's almost like her presence here has like allowed them to be more comfortable in this area, but they're not something that like doesn't naturally occur anyway every once in a while, you know? Like, there are Skulltulas in other places in this game, outdoors, indoors. Like, they're kind of a common enemy. We don't know that yet, but this early on in the game, like, it does seem like they fit in a lot better, and it's almost like they were attracted to this whole situation, but not necessarily they're the ones infecting it. Like, they're more here because of what's happening, they're not actually what's happening.
They like took advantage of the Deku Tree being in a weakened state and kind of infested it, whereas they might have been there minutely before that, but now they've really exploded in population and they're everywhere.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I agree with that. So the Deku Scrubs gave you your tip to hit her while she's stunned. And there's a couple ways to do that. One of which I like to use right off the bat is the Deku Nuts that we've had since the beginning. It's just kind of a common item that you kind of pick up, and the game doesn't make a big deal out of them, aside from the first time you pick them up. But they end up actually being a pretty useful item. I think they're a little bit underrated. You can stun a lot of enemies with these things. True. They're just a good way to like freeze combat if you're feeling overwhelmed. Of course, you have to have them equipped, but for this battle, I always do. The other method, if you're able to lock on, or if you are able to get a good shot at the ceiling, is to straight up shoot her in the eyeball with that slingshot you got. It's going back, didn't feel like as easy as a shot as it has always been, but that's because these latest runs I've been playing on the Wii U, and the sensitivity isn't really something that can be adjusted. It feels old school. Every little click like sends the slingshot way past what you're trying to aim at. That's just more of a personal complaint, but I was able to get off a few of those shots, knock her off the ceiling, and it can be really satisfying, especially if you keep her from dropping any of her larvae, because that's, she has two primary ways of attacking. One is to just be on the ground attacking you. But the second she realizes that that's not going to work because you can stun her and hit her pretty easily that way, then she starts retreating to the ceiling, where she'll drop 3 eggs at a time to turn into larvae for you to fight.
It can actually be advantageous to do that because those things can drop, I think, just about every item that you use in the fight against her. I think they can drop seeds, the ammo for the slingshot, and hearts.
Nice. I think the plants around the room do that too.
Yeah, they do.
I don't think I ever let them out of their eggs, but yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you can kill them while they're still in egg form before they hatch.
Yeah, I've definitely let them out of their eggs. It does complicate things.
A strategy that I want... Well, it's not really a strategy. It's just more of a general knowledge. But something I want to point out is there is different amounts of time that she can be stunned for depending on how you stun her. So a Deku Nut, if you just throw it right at her eyeball, will stun her for around 2 seconds, where if you fire a seed from the slingshot while her eye is red, she'll actually be stunned for 5 seconds. And then if you nail her while she's on the ceiling, she'll be stunned for around 8 seconds, giving you a lot more time to get in hits. And a strategy that I found, which sort of speeds the fight up, because you can just, slash at her way, and it usually takes around 2 to 3 times of stunning for her to be finished completely. If you want to speed that process up, if you're an advanced player or something like that, once you stun her, I'd recommend doing a ceiling stun. You can actually use a Deku stick and do a jump strike with the Deku stick. And then once you finish that jump strike off, you then do the shield stab, which is a classic move that Link can know. So you hold your shield button, and you just repeatedly use the stab button, the attack button, basically. And Link will just start going ham on Goma's eyeball. And if you're good enough, you can do it in one stun. But most of the time, it's 2 stuns for that strategy.
That's actually a glitch.
Is it a glitch?
Yeah, so the crouch stab attack doesn't actually have a damage value. So it takes the damage value of the last attack that you did. And the strongest attack at this point in the game that you can do is a jump strike with the Deku stick. So doing a jump strike with the Deku stick and then going into crouch stabs, every single crouch stab has the damage of that jump attack with the Deku stick.
Well,
Wow.
That's something that speedrunners take advantage of, yeah.
Yeah. So the crouch stab, you can't do that if you're locked on, right? Because he stands up if you lock on. So you have to land that attack and then just plant right in front of her and just stab her a bunch of times that way?
Yeah, you could lock on, walk up to her, and then just deactivate the lock on and then start doing it.
Because I think you need the lock on for the jump strike.
Gotcha.
But then you can immediately take it off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, ceiling shots are the way to go if you can get it off, basically. Because it gets you 8 seconds of straight attacks on Goma.
Nice. Yeah, I did notice that when I was able to shoot her off the ceiling.
Yeah.
It gives you plenty of time to
skedaddle your way on over there.
So eventually you do defeat Queen Goma using these methods. She burns up in the flame. And that's kind of a contrast to some of how the other bosses die, but she doesn't leave anything behind, except for the first heart container that you get, and then
it's almost like you broke the curse.
Yeah, you broke the curse, and you're able to leave out of the first blue boss room teleporter that you have. I don't really know any lore explanation for why these things come up. They're just a convenient way to get back out of dungeons. I'm going to chalk that one up to video game logic for now. Later dungeons, there seems to be more of a lore significance to them, but in these 3, there's no such thing. And it takes you right back outside where the Deku Tree is waiting to congratulate you with the worst news. Hello, Ryan Fonzie here, co-host and editor of this week's episode of A for No, B for Yes. Just wanted to pop in real quick, say thank you for giving us a listen, for giving us a chance. Just wanted to add a little bit of information. If you were looking to reach out to us, you could do so at our Twitter at A for No, B for Yes. That is the letter A, number 4, no, letter B, number 4, yes. We also have a Gmail of the same name. That's A for No, B for Yes at gmail.com. We definitely would love to hear from you, hear your thoughts on this section of the game. Let us know what you think. Come join up and be a part of the discussion. At this point, we are hoping to have a bi-weekly release of the podcast. If anything with that changes, we'll let you know. Just as a heads up, in the future, we do not plan on going through this much of a walkthrough of the game. That's not really the intention of this podcast. And we also do not intend to release 2-hour episodes every other week. This is our first experience with podcasting, and we weren't entirely sure of how long we could go the first time we sat down to record. So for this episode, we gave ourselves a little bit more leeway. Typically, we'll try to keep it shorter. But we hope you enjoy the episode. We did lose a little bit of audio in the last 5-10 minutes of our recording. And we did a little bit of patchwork to try to put it back together. So we apologize for the drop in quality. We hope it doesn't ruin your experience. So with that, we will jump right back into our story. Thanks. So we end up back outside the front of the Deku Tree, and he congratulates us with the worst news. He explains to Link that, even though you were able to defeat the curse and clear it out, there's still no hope for him. He knows his time has been shortened. He knows that he's at this point lost too much power, and essentially he's going to die. And this is something that as a kid, it was upsetting to know that even though I had technically won, I had somehow still failed. As an adult, just kind of knowing or reading into it a little more, this is way more tragic than the game lets on. The Deku Tree is this guardian spirit that, as far as we know, Link has known his entire life. All of the Kokiri look at this Deku Tree as a father figure. He's given them life. He protects them. He leads them. I mean, odds are they go to him for advice and
relationship advice.
Right. Whatever it is, like, he's the one who's trying to teach Link and help him on this journey. So what he shares with him, like, this curse was put on me by this man of the desert. I think this is where he finally shares with you that his name was Ganondorf. And what he shares is that this man of the desert is in a search for the sacred realm and the Triforce. Triforce being like the main artifact of the game that everyone's after. It's something that was created by essentially like the gods of this world. It represents the ideals of those gods, and it's capable of granting one wish to whoever lays hands on it. So Ganondorf's after that wish. Really long story short, but going into it, in order for you to really understand the gravity of this, and to kind of even understand the journey that you're being asked to go on at this point, the Deku Tree goes into a story about the creation of the world and these gods and how the Triforce came to be. It's not every world that has a magic wish granting Triforce in it, so it's kind of important to understand why this is even here. It's one of the most in-depth history lessons that this game offers. There's a lot that you have to accept at this point in terms of Link just happening to be in this village, even though he doesn't really look like everyone else in the village, which they'll get into later. But for now, there's just been a lot of things. Like, you wake up, it's like, you're the chosen one. Oh, okay, sure. I don't know why, but whatever. I trust this tree, So so this kind of takes it way back and it kind of almost backpedals and gives you more of the complete story of, like, the big picture of what's going on in this world. There's an evil climate coming in from this man who's after this Triforce, and it's ultimately going to be up to Link to stop it. So getting into to the history, there are 3 goddesses. They're golden. Not sure what the significance of that is, but you never really see them animated. They are always almost statuesque in their imagery. They fly around the world like comets, and eventually they crash into each other and leave the world. But they kind of go. This is kind of their descriptions, right? So first you have Din. Din is the goddess of power. She's red. Everything about her, like she gives off a red aura, like red being a powerful color, obviously. She's credited with creating the red earth. So you see this history lesson of Din flying by and like the stones all kind of crashing together in a foggy collision that is forming the earth, right? Next up is Nehru, who is the goddess of wisdom, and her color scheme is blue. she is told to have poured her wisdom onto the earth, creating the spirit of law. So her whole scene, she flies by over the red earth that Din had created, and you see the sky, blue sky with clouds appear, like it turns blue. This would, I mean, knowing the science of that, clouds, it's the water that's in the air. She basically added water to this world. Kind of a huge step. You know, it's really subtle in this cutscene, but I think it actually means a lot more to this game than they let on. These are the things that I feel like end up being things you need to read into in order to really catch what's going on.
Yeah.
But Ferora is our last goddess, and her symbol, like her color is green, right? She's a goddess rich in soul. She created all the life forms who would uphold the law. You know, it shows her kind of flying by. Again, you see Din's red earth, and you see all of a sudden grass starts growing. Like she's added the greenery and life essentially to this world. So you have the foundation, you have water, and then you have all of the living things that would use that water and that earth to survive.
And, isn't Ferrara the goddess of courage?
Yes.
Yes, she's the goddess of courage. I should have.
Something I wanted to piggyback off of that is Link is also the color green, and time again in every Legend of Zelda game, it sort of is a reoccurring theme that Link is courage itself. And so Link could basically be seen as, I don't want to like say this, but a reincarnation of the goddess Fiora.
Or Ferora's champion, kind of like how, totally off topic, how Skyrim has deities that bestow upon their champion's power, kind of like Link is her chosen successor, type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always garbed in green for sure. I think it's it's
an important detail. It's a good detail.
The color is important. I mean, honestly, like going through the game this time, kind of everywhere I'm going, I'm kind of looking for these colors and where they are. And I think this game eventually breaks away from this, but the first 6 major areas we go are going to somehow represent one of these goddesses. I would say the last 3 are the ones that don't, but they kind of have their own weight to them. By then we've seen enough of this story that we can kind of move on to another layer. So they, after creating the world, came together and left the world, which I think is kind of an interesting description. Like a lot of times you hear about goddesses, or deities in a mythology, and they're usually like ever present, or they're like somewhere on the planet but like kind of separated from everyone else. No, these 3 created the Triforce and straight up dipped.
Yeah.
like they kind of make it sound like you're never gonna actually see these people. Like they're gone. And
forever, like, you know, for a while, we actually never really seen them again. I mean, they're mentioned in, I think, Oracle of Ages. I don't know, Cameron, if you can correct me on that.
Can I bring up a theory?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe the goddesses are gold, right? We brought up that they're like golden statues.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what color is the Triforce?
The Triforce is made of solid gold. I mean, that's...
So maybe instead of creating the Triforce and dipping, maybe the goddesses literally combined their own bodies to become the Triforce. Which is why each different part of the Triforce is directly connected to a different essence of each of those goddesses.
That is a strong theory.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm entirely sold on it, but I like it.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, it does explain, like, if we're going to have the continuum of, you know, every Zelda game, like, obviously being a timeline, that theory definitely holds tight if they are the Triforce. You know, their essence is...
Yeah. And the Triforce is just weird, too, because in other games, I'll just say one little thing from in other games I remember, that the Triforce gets to choose who it wants to be with. The Triforce can actually reject or choose somebody, and it would make sense that there was some kind of an intellect behind it, instead of it just being an object created, that it kind of has its own consciousness.
Yeah. Like, it definitely has power. It has a purpose. It becomes the major, I mean, it's a major driving force, not to make puns, of a lot of the games. To the point where I think it shows that, like, there are games that don't talk anything about the goddesses, but the Triforce is still there as the symbol of power, wisdom, and courage. Yeah, and there's always the characters as well, and we haven't met all of them yet, so I don't want to go too hard on that.
Yeah.
The Deku Tree actually describes the Triforce as the basis of this world's providence, which I thought was such a weird phrase. Like, it was something that I obviously, as a kid, I would have never understood that sentence. I was like, what does that even mean? Whatever, Triforce is cool, let's go get it. But, it makes sense that the Deku Tree would know about it, because the Deku Tree is all about providence. Like, the providence is the protective care of either God or of nature as a spiritual power. And nature as a spiritual power is like what the Deku Tree character entirely is. So, I mean, for him to care about this Triforce, it makes perfect sense with who he is. Like, he's concerned with the care of this world. So he gives you this warning that, you can never let this man of the desert reach the Triforce. He talks about how the man killed him with this curse, because he wanted this gem, right? Like this Kokiri's emerald that he gives to you. He says, this is why the man has cursed me, basically, and gives you the gem. And he says that you need to take it and go meet up with the Princess of Destiny. He has not told you that you are the quote unquote child of Destiny. He says it to Navi early on in the game. I don't think I mentioned that earlier in our talk today, but
no, yeah, that's a good point to bring up.
But he sends you to find the Princess of Destiny. He doesn't even tell you what her name is. But I guess there's really only 2 princesses in this world. And the one you end up going to ends up being the right one, so it all works out. So yeah, so Link and Navi, they literally, at that point, after hearing this story of the 3 goddesses and the creation of the Triforce and about the evil that is coming to take hold of it, have to watch the guardian spirit of the forest die right in front of them. He turns gray, almost as if into petrified wood or into rock. And almost immediately Navi and Link decide, okay, we're gonna go do this thing, and they leave. It almost seems cold. Navi just kind of says, come on, Link, let's go. And then she does take a moment to kind of look back as Link walks away. And I just feel like, the weight isn't obvious. Like, I feel like it's definitely written where you're only going to care about it if you really want to care about it. You can definitely walk away from this tree and not think twice about it, because you've only known the tree for, less than an hour of your own life, But I mean, the truth is that this should have a lot of impact both on Link and everyone else in Kokiri Forest. Yeah, I mean, how did you guys feel about this?
So, this is the first time I noticed this. I had not noticed this before. I guess I just never cared to talk to the residents of Kokiri Forest after the Great Deku Tree had passed on. But, if you talk to Mito or Saria or the girl on the roof or the guy pulling weeds or even the guy trying to lift up rocks, any of the Kokiri Forest residents, Mito says, how could you let this happen? How could you let the Great Deku Tree die? The guy pulling weeds and the guy pulling rocks both say, I wonder what's gotten into Mito. He seems very angry or very sad. I don't remember which one it was. And each resident has their own opinion on what's going on with the Great Deku Tree passing. I think Mito and I think Saria are the only 2 that actually know at that moment in time when you're leaving. But that was my take on it. It was I never noticed that. The whole forest is in uproar with the Great Deku Tree dying. Everyone's confused.
I don't think I talked to everyone on my way out. I mean, you have to talk to Mito because he decides to guard your way back into the forest. He essentially blames you immediately for what happened. He's like, the Deku Tree died. How could you do this? and then just kind of dismisses you and is like, whatever, I'm done, and walks away. I didn't even go back to try to talk to him again. I was like, you know what? Like, you weren't there. Like, you don't really understand.
You don't know what happened.
And I know Saria's scene coming up is also it's one of the heavier ones. I think it's honestly like one of the most emotional scenes in the game. One of the strongest ones in my opinion. I don't know if there's anything else you guys wanted to talk about with the village before.
Actually,
we get into that.
yeah, I thought it was interesting that multiple characters, like not the named ones, not the important ones, but the random NPCs, when you talk to them, they say, "You're going to a castle? Where is there a castle?" And that really makes me think that this forest is just completely cut off from the rest of the world. I mean, literally, you leave, and then you're one field away from the castle. You can basically see it from their front door, essentially, and they have no idea that it's even there.
Yeah. You know what?
Well, as Fonzie mentioned in the beginning, it's a forbidden forest, and the Great Deku Tree sealed it off, from... I'm guessing both ways. Like, I guess this is the first time you realize that even the people inside the forest didn't know there was an outside.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how Link's, parents or, whoever dropped him into this woods got there
in the
first
place.
Get there?
Yeah, I did neglect to kind of mention some of that stuff. I mean, because the Lost Woods, I really want to talk about later. There's like a scene, and it's literally in the next section that you kind of have to revisit. And I feel like it's the actually appropriate time to go to the Lost Woods, rather than going there now. You could go there now and get a lot done, but I like to come to it later. But I mean, one of the major things about the village, if you try to go to the exit before you go to and do the Great Deku Tree, there's a Kokiri standing guard out, like basically other side of the town from Mito, blocking the other entrance. And what he tells you is anyone who leaves this forest will die. Like, if any Kokiri leaves the forest, they will surely die. Like, he or she will surely die. And I don't think he's the only one who has that opinion. Most of the Kokiri feel that if they leave this forest, they're as good as dead. There's never been one to come back, but then again, there's not really any stories of them leaving either. The Lost Woods, I guess I'll break into it a little bit. The Lost Woods is known for kind of taking people. Whether you're an adult or a kid, if you go into the woods, the only thing that can happen is that you will basically cease to be human. And I think getting into actually what that means is a better talk for another time. But essentially, this forest is a giant barrier. Like, these Kokiri have never seen the castle because they've never dared to go over that one last bridge, and I'm sure that was a system set up by the Deku Tree. I don't know if there's some kind of like issue where if they get too far away from the tree they die, because they basically say the Deku Tree gives them life.
They are his children, so
yeah, they're children of the forest. Like, they call him their father. Like, for all you know, I mean, these sprites that we know as Kokiri, they might even be made of plant material, but the game never goes into that.
Something I just thought of, and I don't know if this is going too far away from the actual Ocarina of Time itself, and we might get into this at a way later date, but there are Kokiri and there are the other plant-like creatures. I forgot the name of them at this moment. Koroks. And every Kokiri have not been able to leave their spots. And we see this in Wind Waker, we see this in Ocarina of Time. But the Koroks actually can freely travel anywhere away from the Great Deku Tree that they please. And it makes me wonder, is the Great Deku Tree just lying to the Kokiri children of the forest that they can't leave? Or if they get too far away from him, will his power not reach and will they die? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, another distinction to make is that the Kokiri all have fairies. And fairies are only a thing that really occur in this game and in Majora's Mask. At least in terms of the 3D games. I don't know about like the original or the older games. But Koroks don't. Koroks don't have fairies.
No.
And it seems like the purpose of a fairy is to be a guide. Like it seems like they do a lot of, I mean, like even the girl on the awning is trying to teach you how to use your fairy by locking onto somebody and talking to them that way. The fairy that you're given is named Navi, which is, isn't too subtle. I mean, it can be short for navigation. Like it's she just teaches you stuff and points stuff out, gives you warnings. Like her role is pretty distinct, to the point where it almost seems like the Kokiri are given them for the same reason, like, but they need it. They need warnings. They need to be guided around. Like they're not great at like just living their own lives, because they are kids. Like part of me thinks that the Deku Tree has provided them all with fairies, and he didn't give one to Link because Link didn't need one yet. Like he could navigate the town and like the area around it without needing a guide. But now that he's leaving home and he's going to be taking on a journey that's probably too big for him, without some kind of help, he's like, he needs this fairy for these next parts,
And maybe, this isn't specifically said in the game, but maybe the Deku Tree, knowing Link was there, held Navi, which maybe he thought was his best guide fairy or best fairy for an adventure, like that was able to give the best information. Maybe Navi's like more knowledgeable than the other fairies, and that's why he held off on, giving anyone else a fairy, giving Navi the fairy to Link.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Like that's never mentioned, but it's something I like to think about. Like, why is Navi so much better?
Yeah, it's very speculative. Like I know that Majora's Mask kind of breaks some of that, because there's you get like a totally different fairy in that one, and for different reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there's a lot to that, because I mean originally you're known as the boy without a fairy. Like Link is defined by something he lacks, which is kind of messed up. Like he gets different titles. I mean, everybody either thinks of him as a kid or as a man. Most of the Kokiri think that him getting a fairy is what makes him a man, but a lot of other characters have completely different kind of criteria for that. It's such a there's a lot to go into with that, but I don't like, there's not enough that's, I think, clearly stated in the game to really talk about the lore of the fairies very well.
So I actually did do a lot of exploring in the Lost Woods, and I was gonna talk about it a little bit.
Yes, please, because I remember this.
I won't get too much into the details. I'll just share a couple of little secrets that I found. There is an area with two, what are they called, business scrubs?
Yeah.
They're really bad at their job, though, and all they're trying to sell you are Deku Sticks and Deku Nuts. And since this is after the Deku Tree, you really don't need either of those. So they don't know the whole supply and demand, because they're in a forest trying to sell you trees, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's like a little bush. I don't know, is that what you call it? Like, they have them in the forest, too, the grass that covers the ground that has some rupees hidden in it. They have one of those by a tree, and there's a hidden grotto there that I fell in and didn't even realize that it was there, honestly. And I dropped into a secret place. You guys know what that's about?
I fell into it, but I couldn't do whatever it was I found there and had to leave.
Yeah, it's called the Forest Stage, and for a second when you drop down, you see all the Deku Scrubs up, and then they go down, and I don't really know how to get them to come back up. I think it might have something to do with Saria's song.
Yeah, that would make
later
sense.
On. But it also says something about needing to put a face on.
Yeah, something about, like, I remember there was a sign about either performing or putting on a happy face or something like that. So maybe you need a mask for that, but...
Yeah, I was thinking mask too, maybe.
Huh.
And the other thing is that you can actually get to the first actual temple. Because while you're a child, they're referred to as dungeons, and when you're an adult, they're referred to as temples. You can make it all the way to the Forest Temple as a child. And you can fight a werewolf as the very first werewolf in the entire game that you can fight. It still dies to one jump slash to the tail, though, even with the weakest sword in the game, so that's kind of funny. I don't think you actually fight...
The Wolfos.
Yeah, I don't think you fight a Wolfos until you're an adult otherwise. This is the very first one you can ever fight, and it's like right in the beginning of the game, if you do.
I actually think they're introduced in the Spirit Temple. Or not the Spirit Temple, I'm sorry, the Forest Temple. I think they're pretty much introduced there.
Yeah, there's a pair.
And this is the other spot that has the scrubs. The scrubs are lining this place like crazy. There are no moblins or other kind of enemies there. It's just the scrubs.
Yeah, and they're the mad scrubs that are separate from the Deku Tree.
And I'm wondering if this is where I was going with the thing I was saying. I don't know if I don't know if Goma was like bossing them around so much as the fact that Goma's even there has kind of tainted and corrupted the forest, and the spirits of the forest, not necessarily the children or the fairies, but you could also think of those scrubs as kind of being, spirits of the forest, that they were affected by that corruption and that tainting, and that's what changed them into being basically Goma's servants instead of the Deku's servants, and that when the Deku Tree died, the scrubs around the forest temple as well also became enraged and lost their way, lost the right path that they were on, and became corrupted. Which is why they try to attack you.
That's a good thing to think about.
And then there's one other thing that I want to say, is that I thought this is strictly from a coding perspective, that when I got all the way to the forest temple and couldn't go any farther because of things we'll talk about later, I went back, and there was no cutscene with Saria on the bridge, and there was no conversation with Kabora Gabora at all. It completely removed those as triggers in the game.
Oh, no.
For a way that only I can assume is because you've showed that you have so much... Like, you're such an adept at this game that you already made it all the way to the Forest Temple, which is supposed to be kind of hard. The Lost Woods are not something you're supposed to just walk into and get through as a child. It's supposed to be something that it's a lot of trial and error to make it all the way through. And so the game, it removed triggers because I assume it knows that I know what's up and that it doesn't need to tell me.
Huh. And when you told me that, and then you started mentioning the scrubs, it made me think because... they have two different programming, I don't know if I want to say landscapes for when you're a kid and when you're an adult, when you're in the Lost Woods and the Forest Temple is, you mentioned, obviously there's no moblins and they're replaced with the mad scrubs. So, they obviously programmed that you can go there as a kid and you can also go there as an adult. So they obviously left the Lost Woods open to you being there as a kid. And then removing Kapora, Gabora, and Saria, it's sort of oh, well, you don't really need them, like you said, but also maybe they took into account, you were exploring these for so long that they're just gone. I don't know.
Did the game...
It was just weird to me.
Did the game give you the ocarina?
No.
How are you...
It didn't.
Okay, you might get stuck then.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I have my system here. Let me open it while we're continuing this, and I'll check if it just appeared in my inventory, which can happen. Oh, God, I forgot it was plugged in.
The game can do that, yeah. I was going to ask if you got Saria's song, but then I was like, wait a minute. You said she wasn't there, but, how would you have learned it without an ocarina? So...
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That was the first place you get your ocarina.
You might be in for a second run of the Deku Tree.
It's weird that they have programmed in though a different landscape for a child.
Yeah,
and then they have programmed in a different landscape for an adult because when you're an adult, there's a lot of different monsters that are in the Lost Woods.
They obviously left it open,
Temple.
That you could get to the Forest Temple. So I feel like Nintendo isn't so bad at making games and testing them that they would have such a glaring beginning of the game, soft lock, where the game would be completely unbeatable or unpassable for a certain point just because you went somewhere that was totally intended for you to be able to go. That would be really surprising to me. Oh, I actually have it, yeah. I don't know when it happened, but out of nowhere, I have the ocarina in my inventory. I can access it.
I imagine they gave you the ocarina the second you hit Hyrule Field, because the game probably assumes you can't get to Hyrule Field without this. having gotten this. So.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I imagine that it's kind of funny, but I imagine that you didn't get the ocarina until you hit Hyrule Field, and Saria probably doesn't show up until you have the ocarina. So you probably didn't learn the song because you didn't go to the field. So like you kind of went all the way there, and kind of just lost. I don't know. You lost your cutscene and everything, but like to think that you could have you could make it all the way there and just not get the song because the game was broken in other ways. Like I don't know. It's just a weird loop of problems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So if you play the game, and don't do that, I guess.
The normal way.
You play the game the normal way. You start heading towards this castle, and you make your way over to the exit. The Kokiri over there is still just his mind is blown that you would ever leave, but he doesn't actually try to stop you this time. And there's no explanation for that. He just decides, oh, okay, I'm not really guarding this exit anymore.
Yeah, I don't even think that specific Kokiri knows that the Deku Tree's dead yet.
Right, he's just surprised that you're leaving, even though he physically stopped you earlier.
Yeah, it's a weird loop.
So you get out, and weirdly, like this is one of the strangest like intros to a cutscene for me, because Link goes running across this bridge, and you know, if you're quick, you can see that there's a ferry there. But is one of the only cutscenes I think I've ever seen where there's intentional pop-in, because he almost makes it past like all the way across this bridge when Saria appears next to her ferry, and calls out to Link, and he's completely stopped in his tracks. You know, she kind of shares with him. She has this moment of like, I always knew you'd be leaving because you're different than all of my other friends. I want you to have this, right? And she gives you her fairy ocarina. Turns out she has another one, but we'll get to that later. And she says, when you play my ocarina, I hope that you will think of me and come back to the forest to visit. There's a line in there where she kind of also says, you know, like, everything will be okay. Like, it'll be okay. I know it'll be okay because we'll always be best friends, won't we? And she kind of phrases it as a question. But at the same time, you kind of get this feeling like she's kind of going through a loss of her own. Like, I don't know if she doesn't mention the Deku Tree. She only is there to kind of talk to you about the fact that you are now leaving. And that it's going to affect your guys' relationship. Like, you guys have been best friends. I don't know for how long, but she's clearly this character whose house is full of hearts. Like, she loves hearing good news about you. Like, the fact that you're now off on this adventure means that you're not going to see each other for a while. And I mean, spoilers, like, it's not as long as you might think. Before you finally like come visit again. But that aside, it's like it's this really heavy and touching moment of like, hey, like there's a courage involved in being able to take on a mission when it means that, you know, certain relationships might suffer, when it means like, you know, you're leaving something behind in order to take on something that's greater or more important. I mean, obviously, like, Link is going to protect this entire world, according to what the tree has told him, and that includes his forest and his home with all of his friends. But he doesn't really have a response to this. Link, after hearing this, takes two kind of awkward steps backwards.
I noticed that.
Pauses, and then just kind of books it. Like, he doesn't say anything back to her. Like, she's kind of left just kind of gazing out at where he runs. And I mean, I've always felt a little bit of frustration with Link over this one. But at the same time, I'm like, this is a kid who doesn't know what he's in for, you know? All he knows, he just watched his father, you know, basically pass away right in front of him. Now he's got his best friend basically like saying she's worried, that, you know, she thinks things are going to be okay. She wants him to come back and visit, but as far as he knows, like, the second he leaves this forest, he might die. You know, like, he's a Kokiri after all, or at least he thinks he is. So, you know, like, there's a lot going on here, and I just don't think he processes it all very well. Yeah, what did you guys make of this scene?
Well, if we take away the fact that Link is a mute, basically,
Okay.
and if you give him the ability that he has conversations with people, you just don't hear it. I sort of thought like Link, like, because I don't think I ever caught the two-step thing in the run before until I played this time, and when I saw that, I sort of thought like he was just like, well, I'm gonna die, so I'm just not saying bye, and I'm just gonna run away, basically, is what I got out of that. I don't know, Cameron, do you have anything?
Well, I didn't get to really see that scene.
Oh, right. Right.
But I do actually remember that two-step and run. But I didn't get a lot of chance to meditate on it because I didn't see it, so I didn't even think about it until you guys just brought it back up into my memory.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't really have anything to add.
It's just
yeah, the dude just walks right away.
Yeah, it's almost like they, the death of the Deku Tree was kind of downplayed to set up this moment as like being the critical one of Link leaving the forest, and it just comes across as really as kind of deeper than what I expected at the beginning of the game. I remember this scene always having an impact whenever I would, like I knew it was coming because I had seen it twice before, but yeah, it's always kind of made me feel a similar way of like, it really feels like there's some level of loss here, like you feel like you've lost this best friend, even though, in reality, you could turn right back around if you wanted to, but,
Yeah, speaking of turning around, do you know the movie trope, don't look back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that is what Link embodied with his movement. Like, the way she was looking at him, the way she was talking to him, if he stayed any longer than that, he might have faltered and not been able to go through with the journey that he was tasked with as the child of destiny.
Yeah.
I feel like he had to run away because his heart, he probably wanted to stay there. These are the people he's been around his entire life, but he was told he has to leave them all behind and go out and do his own thing. So, he probably wanted with all his heart to stay there and to embrace her and to live in the forest like he always had, but instead he knew he had to tear himself away from everything he's ever known and just run and never look back.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
And I feel like that's like a really emotional thing that he portrays very well in his... Like, it's not even just a 1-2 step back. I think, maybe not in the original, but in the 3DS one, his whole body actually recoils. Like, his arms go out, he leans back, like...
And there's a pause, too.
I don't know, like there's something so bright in front of him that he just can't handle it, and he has to just turn and run, or else maybe he would be engulfed
There's
by
a pause, actually, too, after the 2 steps. He pauses, I want to say at least a second, maybe half a second, but it's a noticeable pause before he books it.
He hesitates.
Yeah. So that's a really good point to bring out.
Very strong scene.
Yeah, and I think that it does a good job of just like hitting on some deeper sides of like what's really going on in Link's world. Again, I guess I don't want to beat this to death, but as the 8 or 10-year-old playing this game like for the first time, the GameCube, I think I got back in 2004, so I would have been 12 when I actually owned the game, but I think I had seen this scene before then, just from playing through the beginning. You don't get it. You don't really understand all of it. Like, it really comes across as a lot more shallow. It's like you're having too much fun to realize that there's like real loss and real courage and real like emotions going on in these characters, even though raw emotion. You just kind of are excited to get to the next thing and fight the next monster,
Yeah, like I definitely felt that on first time I played it on the N64, like back in, I think it was 1999 or 2000. I did not pay attention to anything, and even the second time I played through it, which I want to say was high school, and I never really paid attention to this stuff, and this playthrough, I'm picking up on every single key little detail, and it's almost weird. Like, it's a game that I feel is different for everybody. Everybody takes something away from it.
Yeah, it's
something different.
It's kind of like a novel. Like it's one of the, yeah. It starts real strong. I feel like there are some parts in this game where I struggle to find as much feeling as here in these opening hours of the game. Second time just recently playing this, it only took me about an hour to get this far. But still, like it's such a strong opening if you're just willing to listen to what the characters have to say and understand what would have led to this and how they, how they're actually taking it real time. Because obviously it's really hard to really express things well when you're dealing with the graphics of 1998. But they did a really good job of just visual storytelling and kind of nailing some of these, I don't want to say subtleties, but nailing some of these deeper aspects of relationships. So yeah, like I think that with this game, one of the things that they really got right was being able to tell the story without too much writing.
Oh yeah.
Like they definitely do. Like the Deku Tree definitely dumps some lore on you right at the end here, but even with that, like that's way less than some RPGs try to give you today. Like I know games where you can read every wall and like there's just text everywhere to kind of sift through and dive into, and just you could be reading for days.
Yeah, like the kids that have grown up with open world games and AAA voice acting and the majority of the things that they play and graphical fidelity that almost mirrors like what Hollywood can do with multi-million-dollar movies. And then to go back to a game, even the 3DS remake of it, that is old, it's dated. But how do they see that?
This one doesn't really need that. They kind of tell the story through their characters, through their settings. If you take the time to talk to the NPCs, most of them only have 1 or 2 boxes of dialogue, and that's enough for them to tell you a full story. It's a very concise and effective way of telling it.
Yeah, the stories are told more so through the actions of the characters themselves than the words spoken by them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need Ganondorf to come up to you and brag about how awesome he is. Later on things, but he doesn't ever, like, talk to you and say, I'm this big bad guy. It's just the things that he does. Like, already we can see that he's corrupted and killed the great forest tree. He didn't even need to say a single word to you for you to already have this understanding of exactly how bad he is.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys feel good about moving on?
Alright, so after we leave Kokiri Forest, we get to Hyrule Field. We see Gebora, the owl on the tree. And this guy has a lot to say to you. A lot. And he just starts talking about going to the castle, Link's hardships he's going to face on his way there. Just more of the nonsense that he's going to be talking about. And at this point, everyone's telling you to get to the castle. So you should just go there.
Yeah. And if you're like me, you might not even really care much about the owl at first, because you just see this giant opening and you're like, oh man, look at this sandbox, I'm gonna go play. And then you kind of get caught by the owl because this dude wants to talk. Honestly, I didn't even take notes on this guy. I don't know what he actually says. I know it's along the lines of, if you go forward, you'll run into the castle. And then he just gives you 3 more paragraphs for no reason. And then at the end, he says, did you catch all that? And your first option is no. So if you click A, you are back in it, folks. You go right back on that loop.
Yeah, don't spam through Gebora.
I don't even know if pressing B works. Like, I don't even know if you press B, if it actually works as the yes and you get out of it.
I don't think it does. I think if you press B, it does nothing.
Yeah, I think it's still a no. I think if you press B, it counts as no anyway, and he still goes back to the beginning. But if you do go down and hit yes, I know for sure that works. But that's the only one I tried this time, so I can't verify that. I just know that this owl used to cause me so much pain as a kid, because you're not patient enough to know to stop and hit no. Like, you You're just jamming that A button.
Actually, specifically, if you do hit no the first time, I'm pretty sure he remarks on it and he says, "Oh, looks like you're paying attention," or something. Or you know how to pay attention, or something like that. And he didn't even show up for me.
All right, so I think with that, we've reached the conclusion of this week's episode. Next week, we'll be covering up to the gate to Death Mountain. So if you have any comments on that, please feel free to shoot us an email.
And we would love to hear your feedback on our episode.
And if you like the show, the best compliment you can give us is to share us with a friend.
Cam, Ryan, where does that leave us?
And so I think that just about wraps up the first episode of A for No, B for Yes.
Did you get all that?